Well, I declare the meeting
Copy link
uh,
address.
started. So, first of all, I would like to welcome our new members, Brad and Catherine. And would you like to give introduce yourself just a little bit?
Sure,
I'll put you on the spot. but-
sure. I use the he series of pronouns. I am a stay-at-home dad here in Concord. Before becoming a stay-at-home dad, I worked for 14 years in the Massachusetts House of Representatives as a staff director for a state representative.
Mhm.
And when she retired, I retired. And I have spent, other than chasing my 4-year-old around town, the other things that I spend my time on are volunteering with Clean Water Action and with Mothers Out Front. And between that and vacuuming, that's pretty much my whole life.
Okay, Catherine, it's your turn.
Sure, thank you. Great to be here. So I'm also right now, I guess, at home. I moved here in 2019, actually 2020. Moved across the country from California after living there for close to 25 years. With an education wearing a variety of hats and roles, from teacher to researcher, evaluator, school administrator. Left my job, moved east permanently from my husband's job. COVID hit, we moved to Arlington, moved to Concord in 2020. Fast forward a couple years, but basically the last few years I've sort of, I started out in environmental education. That was my first job, doing, hanging out with young people in the woods, and I just realized that I sort of had a moment where I realized I wanted to really pivot and really dive deep into climate. So I've been working with Mothers Out Front, sustainability committee at the district, and just really trying to, make a difference.
Very good.
Climate front.
Okay, so what we should do next is actually get somebody to be a clerk for tonight. We don't have the minutes from the last meeting, and I don't remember, was it you who took the minutes?
No, I think,
Is it Gavin,
Gavin, yeah.
maybe?
Gavin took the minute, okay,
Maybe.
so
Okay.
she's Gavin down the minutes. So would anybody volunteer to take the minutes this evening? And I think it'd be really nice if somebody was willing to volunteer for the year, so we know who's responsible.
Well,
Yeah.
so I'm just gonna remind you, when I first joined here, one of the things I said is that I would not do that, because I spent 5.5 years on the White Pine Advisory Committee as the only one taking minutes, because either they didn't have computers, they didn't know how to use computers. And so I'm adamant that I will not be the note taker full-time, because I did that for 5.5 years on White Pond, and I'm happy to take my turn doing it, but I don't want to do it full-time.
Okay,
Been doing that a lot.
so,
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do it tonight. I don't know if I want to do it full
Okay,
time,
well,
instead of
do
just
it-
diving
do
in,
it-
but maybe I'll do it tonight and then we can
do it tonight.
revisit, or
That would
maybe
be-
we could do it on a
Yeah.
quarterly basis or something.
Okay,
One thing I'd like to suggest, and I know this asks for more, is for if someone takes the minutes, it's really good to get them in the first couple of weeks of the month to help move things forward. It's not necessarily more work. Of course, it's more intense work to kind of, but it's more fresh in one's mind. Then we
And we
don't get
also-
to the situation where Gavin doesn't get around to it.
yeah, we also gotta remember what happened at the meeting better if it comes sooner rather than later.
But it's
Yeah.
very helpful. There's a recording that
Yeah,
Eric has. and
I'll
you
send the
can listen
recording
the
to
whole
whoever
thing.
takes the minutes, so they can, if they
Oh,
want
it's
to,
a
they can look at the
transcript,
recording, and then
yeah.
there's also the AI transcript, which may or may not be
Really,
helpful.
right.
When I looked at it, it
Usually
was-
not terrific, but some people find it helpful just to trigger things, but I send both of those out, usually by tomorrow.
That's great.
And then,
Are there requirements though to get minutes sent to the
The-
powers
the-
that be, the government?
Yes.
Or to
we're
maybe
supposed
maybe it's
to-
you.
The minutes get posted to the town, so they're on the town's website.
Okay, and is
There's
there,
no,
I think they
there's
usually-
no deadline.
there's no
There's no,
deadline?
there is no deadline. for it.
No.
I
Okay,
think this usually go to the clerk's office,
They-
because it's
they
not
do,
something that's
yeah.
come to me.
But,
okay.
think
but
it
you
goes-
don't need to send them, I mean, they have to be approved and then they're sent by,
There is a there's a process in that, the town posts the approved minutes. So the process is whoever takes the minutes will present them at the, the next meeting. Members will review them and then we'll vote on accepting the minutes. Once they've been accepted by the committee, then someone forwards them to the town clerk who posts them. So I don't know exactly what the legal requirements are, but I think that's probably close to it.
Okay, I think
But
so.
but there's no
Sounds right.
deadline for some,
And
because they are,
I just realized I didn't introduce you to, I don't know whether you know Jerry Frankel,
I don't think so.
Cheryl Bagan, how you doing?
Been a committee member for a while.
Great.
The other thing to remember on minutes is all you need to do is record. It's important to just record decisions made, but you don't have to worry about getting each and every word, or don't go into too terribly much detail. And I think we sometimes go into more than we need to.
That is
Um,
true. That
The
is
most
true.
things. Is the person on iPhone is a committee member or not?
I was just gonna ask that, it might possibly
Yeah.
be Paul.
If you're looking at the MM, that's Mike McDonald. That's me.
That's
Oh,
Mike
okay.
McDonald. Yes. Okay,
Okay.
Mike's on the committee.
Just as iPhone. Okay. So,
Yeah,
Mike
that's me.
We
McDonald.
just see iPhone.
Okay.
All right. So the next meeting, the fourth Monday next month is August the 26th. Is who's going to be around? Is that a good day for anybody? You, since it's August, but it's
Is it a Monday again? Sorry.
it's yes, Monday the
It's
26th
just basically 4
is
weeks
the
now.
is the fourth Monday next month.
I should be here.
It should be.
I should be
okay.
here, and if not,
Okay,
I
yes,
think it's
okay.
opens on
All right,
that,
that
yeah.
sounds good.
Yeah.
So we'll plan on that. Okay, chair update. Well, I will start, and I will start with something that is not particularly to do with Concord, but to do with the state legislature. Right now, the State House is in its final throes of the legislative session. And the Senate has introduced a very strong climate bill. The House version is not so strong. Right now, there's a committee. What's the name of the committee? I want to say resolution,
Conference
but that's
committee.
not the right word.
Conference committee.
Conference committee.
Thank you. Anyway, they're meeting now and I made notes of what. So there's things in the Senate bill to electrify or plans to electrify the MBTA rail. For support for EV school buses. More money to support EV adoption, including extending the More EV program to 2027. Commits pole mounted chargers, which good idea in many ways. And they also want to update the Massport charter so that they prioritize climate action, which would be wonderful if they did that. Removes biomass as a clean energy source. And gas utilities regulations that allows them to include non-emitting thermal energy, i.e. Using them for electrical heat pumps. There may be more than that, but anyway, a lot of people are saying, contact your representative. To tell them to contact members of the committee. Senator Barrett, who's our senator, is on that committee. So I think that's all I have to say. Brad, have you got?
I don't know. So those things that you listed, those are in both the Senate and the House version of the bill, or?
I know they're in the Senate version, and I think
Okay.
the House version is somewhat weaker, and I have not read all
Okay.
these bills myself, so I don't know.
Okay. Okay, I don't really have any more to add today. Other than it's been a busy summer. We've, Janet and I have gotten together a couple of times to just try to talk about sort of projects and priorities and stuff. And I sent out a letter, an email to everybody on the committee. And I hope you got it. I hope you all read the email that we sent. We didn't get a lot of replies on things. So like you to feel free to reach out, telling us what you're most interested in, and we want to, keep things moving forward.
Okay,
Um,
Eric. Director's update.
Yeah, so I included a brief update, well, somewhat brief update, in the agenda, just a number of bullet points of some things that have been happening, continue to happen. So obviously I'm not going to go through all this in any detail, but I am happy to take questions. We did, I think, the Sustainability Roundtable happened since our last meeting.
It did.
So I like to think that was pretty successful. I got a lot of positive feedback from town leadership. We probably had about 30 people on site. And it was good. I mean, there were a lot of familiar faces, but that was part of the intent, was to have representatives from different boards and committees and town departments there, sort of all hearing our progress report, if you will, at the same time, so everybody could sort of be on the same page with it. It had some other folks online as well. So thanks to Brad and Courtney, who was a former member of the committee, for helping to update our greenhouse gas inventory with the tool. And Brad presented that information as part of the roundtable, which was also very well received. So overall, I think it went well. I think it was a good starting point. And as I mentioned before, what I'm picturing is that I'd like to have sort of a roundtable event maybe every 6 months or so. And rather than just give broad updates, sort of, dive into some different stakeholder efforts that are happening around supporting the climate action plan. Because ultimately I'd like different boards and committees to be aware of what's happening in different places and different spaces and outside of their own silos and priorities. And then, of course, the public involved in all this too, residents have the opportunity to engage as well. So overall, I think it went well. There's obviously a number of people here who were involved in that as well. So I certainly invite them to chime in if they have any thoughts about it moving forward. And other than that, like I said, I'm happy to field any questions on any of the update material that's in here, if anybody has any specific questions on anything.
I thought it was great, and the people who were asking questions asked very thoughtful questions, I thought. So they understood the stuff, the substance of what you were presenting. So I thought it was great. Thanks, Eric and Brad.
Yeah, I'll just add, I didn't tell you, Brad, but I told Eric that I thought it went very well. I liked it, and I liked the plan to do report outs on a regular basis. The one thing I would suggest is that if you're planning on doing it every 6 months, that you do several topics at that time, because otherwise we can't get through them all. The climate action plan has a lot of meat in it, and to have meaningful feedback, you take some time, and it could take an entire meeting. So if you do it every 6 months, we're only going to get to 2 topics. So my suggestion is just think ahead to 6 months from now, what 3 or 4 topics you want to address at that time.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's gonna be a balance. Like you're saying, I mean, if it's fairly infrequent like that, then I mean, part of the problem of not doing it more frequent is just, asking people to commit to yet another meeting between staff and different boards and committees who are all, already overtaxed in many ways with their time. But yeah, I think we need to be thoughtful about what those will look like, and I certainly welcome input on that. I'd like to balance the opportunity for, maybe a department or a board or committee to go a little bit deeper, but at the same time, still have others, sharing as part of that, each of those opportunities as well, just so everybody's kind of on the same page, but.
Another way to do it, not a complete alternative, but another possibility, which we started with your predecessor. And that would be a report out on one particular section during each climate action committee meeting. Turned out that alone was quite a bit of work and quite a bit of detail, and it took quite a bit of time of the meeting. So there's this challenge of hitting breadth and depth. So you may, every 6 months, we're not going to get much depth because you just can't hit too many. Or you're either going to get breadth or depth at every 6 months. So I'm just pointing out that I love the idea. I think to cover the ground in a reasonably wide and deep way, we'll need more than every 6 months.
What about reports rather than people having to actually come to a meeting? I mean, they might find it easier to, present the information in a report that, anybody could present or could just be handed out. I don't know. I mean, again, just an idea. They wouldn't have to show up. It's already doing it in their office on a regular basis, maybe summarizing what they've been doing.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, is
Yeah.
this, I'm sorry, I missed the roundtable, but is the idea to get everybody to participate, to kind of do a temperature check or just make sure that we're on track, so that all the departments are sort of reporting out into you or the sustainability committee? Or is the idea to actually have more of a working session to dig deep into building electrification or, some part of the plan to actually coalesce people and get maybe some new ideas or fresh perspectives or ideas about how we can do this better or faster? I mean, I guess I'm new, so forgive me
Yeah.
if, what are some of the
Yeah.
goals for?
Well, and I think in part that's this conversation, what we're trying to figure out. I mean, nothing's set in stone. I mean, so I'm looking at it as an opportunity for people to share in, the same time and space. What's happening as in their own sort of domain as it relates to the climate action plan, versus, because I go and I talk to, I'm constantly talking to other staff and other departments, but, I talk to other boards and committees as well. But it's very much a one-on-one effort. So I was trying to see these as a way to bring people together. So there's, hearing from each other. And not that I'm not anticipating that it would be in any, depth. Like, I don't think it would be sort of like you were saying, a working session. I think it in part, it's for people to share progress and selfishly, from my standpoint, accountability.
Right.
Boards and committees are their work. There's any number of them that contribute to sustainability in the climate action plan. So kind of, having them share how their efforts are helping to support that, and what it is that they're doing. But it could be more of a stakeholder focus, or it could be more of, kind of like, what Brad and Janet have suggested over the course of the next few meetings here, which is, it could be based more on sections of the climate action plan and looking at those, and then, stakeholders as that relates to that can share out or something like that. So, but yeah, it's kind of open. I think Brad, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just, I like the idea of, so every 6 months is a long time. And I would like to see reporting towards goals more often than like 3 months. And because and by the way, there is something set in stone. Article 31 is set in stone, and the town has goals now that we have to achieve them, and we have to achieve them in different sectors. So that's set in stone. And so I would love to, as an interim to 6 months, prompt different departments as to what's your goal to achieve Article 61 for your growth, for your thing, and is our love to see some interim reporting on it, not onerous reporting, but letting them know this isn't just show and tell. You know,
So I'd just like to add, we, several years ago, talked about this in this committee. Never made much progress on it, but the concern I had was we had this great plan, detailed plan, and there was no feedback to the town. There was no measurements that were publicized. There was no knowledge of what progress or lack of progress were we making on these goals. The plan has very specific goals. There's a bunch of them. But they've just been sitting there. For the most part, there's been no feedback of, well, are we half the way there to this goal? Are we quarter of the way or not?
Yeah.
So I'm looking for something that will illuminate the status. And from that illumination, we should be able to make plans, whether it's in this committee or with other portions of the town, to step up the game on particular goals.
Yeah, and to build on that, my understanding is the expectation was that, this plan was written with a 5-year time frame, and the plan was from 2020. So we're coming right up on that 5-year time frame, and so we really, as part of this whole process, whether it be through these roundtables and this committee and looking at these sections of the plan is thinking about how do we revise this plan? Because we're 5 years in, we've made some progress. There's
Need to know
some
where
things
we
have been
are.
accomplished, some things are in progress, and things have not been addressed. And so, how do we want to go about revisiting the plan, redoing the plan to reflect where we are and where we want to be?
Yeah, and you can imagine that it's sort of a forward to that plan that says, here's where we are based on our goals 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And given where we are, that sets the stage for where we want to go or how we get to where we want to go.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll shut up, enough said.
I wanted to ask about, you talk about grant opportunities and who's giving grants. But what have you got as to what those grants might achieve?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, I think that's something I would love to work with the committee on. So I've been trying to think about grants and pursuing grants in sort of a strategic way. So there's opportunities out there, there's challenges to Concord with pursuing some of these grants. But there are opportunities. We know there's some recurring opportunities. There's Green Communities money that's available every year to us as a green community. There's other grant programs that are recurring. So what I'm working on right now is trying to sort of assess and align priorities as part of, this process of reviewing the plan and priorities related to that, to pursuing grants and how we want to most strategically pursue grants. I very much like to be proactive as much as possible with all of that and with those opportunities. So one of the things that I would love to have input from the committee is trying to work on scoping out what we see as opportunities as they relate to the priorities. So how can we, kind of draft out what ideas are that are going to support those priorities so that we at least have something that we're working with, even if it's a fairly broad framework, for these grant opportunities, especially ones that are the recurring ones that we know that they're coming along. So it's sort of this, like right now I see it as, we just updated the greenhouse gas inventory. We're going to be going through the plan, as a group, and I've been going through the plan, looking at priorities and opportunities. And so what I'd love to do is start scoping out things. So for example, if we're looking at the built environment and building electrification, you know, what do we see as opportunities for community engagement to reach out to the community? And how can we scope something? You know, begin to scope something now as opportunities arise that we can have in hand. So when those opportunities come up. So, and that includes, you know, particular areas that we want to focus on within that, like for community engagement opportunities. Collaborations and partnerships, which I think I've been working on trying to build and explore, because I see that as a key element for grant support. Concord alone as a town faces a lot of challenges for pursuing grants, especially federal grants. There's more emphasis on collaborations and partnerships. And there's, you know, a lot of the, well, federal and state as well, you know, have a lot of the challenges of, you know, looking for underserved communities, environmental justice communities, which are things that, you know, are a challenge for us. So how do we leverage partnerships and collaborations to sort of think beyond Concord to try to leverage those things that would probably, we would not be very effective at pursuing independently.
Right.
Um,
I'm thinking that, we've got new people here, and I'm not sure I don't know the answer to these questions either. I mean, you know, what sort of support can you get for the Green Communities competitive grants versus the Leaders Program, for example? And then there's two municipal vulnerability preparedness
mhm.
opportunities. So, you know, what kind of things do they offer is really my question.
Offer in terms of,
Well,
Were they aimed at?
you know, what issue is most likely to be supported by this kind of grant? What kind of grants do they normally dole out for what issues?
so Green Communities, I think historically has been focused on buildings and transportation related, you know, and those are focused on municipal operations, so municipally owned buildings. So you know, there are certainly opportunities in town with municipal buildings to continue to do projects for electrifying our municipal buildings. And I've been having conversations with the new facilities director about that and trying to be strategic about that. One of the challenges at the moment in my conversations with him is he's very interested, and so one step back, and I think you've heard this in some of my previous updates, which is, you know, the town has dedicated funding to do investment grade audits on our municipal buildings. And I've been working with the new facilities director to try to move that forward. And he's very interested in an energy services company model for the town, which he thinks would be a very good strategy moving forward for our municipal buildings from a facility standpoint, but also from a sustainability standpoint.
Can you say a little more specifically about that model? Or what?
So that model is where you contract with a company and basically they serve as kind of an umbrella for all of your municipal facilities in terms of managing them. That includes, you know, upgrading systems, electrifying buildings, maintenance of buildings. You know, if you have
Could I interrupt you for a minute? This
Mhm.
update that you gave about interested in discussing, interested in ESCO model, etc., sounds like the same update from last month. And there's nothing in this update that says, is something going to happen in 2024 or in September or October? There's not this. I have very little information from this update as to what the actions are towards getting this work done, when it's going to happen. And I just don't get any sense that it's beyond discussions.
Well, it's, you know, we have a new facilities director.
Yeah.
I'm competing with his time among him,
Yeah.
you know, managing all the facilities. We have had some conversations. We've had conversations with some ESCO companies.
So what's the schedule? When does the decision get made?
We're currently working on putting together information based on these conversations, sort of a package, if you will, that's been requested of us by town leadership that we can share with them, with finance, with the town manager's office and others to educate them about the ESCO model with the intent of trying to move forward with that. We are planning to do that in mid to late August.
Good, good. That's,
To be able
that's good
to
information.
sit down with them and share all that information with them. Hopefully they'll be on board with that and a green light. And assuming that's the case, if all goes well with that, then what we, well, because we're also based on that, trying to work on a scope. I've got some RFPs from some other towns who've pursued ESCOs. So we're looking at a scope, and then if all goes well, we would be hopefully going out to bid for an ESCO. I don't know the exact time frame of that. I'm trying to figure out how long that takes.
Right. But that's that's a better update than is in the written report. Much more detailed. It's nice to know that.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I could spend a lot of time doing a written report for each meeting, but I can work on, providing more detail if that's helpful.
Yes, detail
yeah,
is what
so-
we kind of need.
Yeah, so that's, so for example, that's in the works. Both the facilities director and I have a vested interest in trying to make this happen as quickly as possible, this whole process. And in part, that's because we're also trying to coordinate it with the audits and the fact that there's already been money budgeted for the audits. But we don't want to do the audits separately, because if you go with an ESCO, they're not going to use those audits. They're going to do their own audits, because they're not going to want to use somebody else's audits to base all your buildings on. So there's a little bit of chicken and egg, and sort of, coordinating that with the budget and what's already been in place. So we're trying to work through all that now, but ultimately we want to get an RFP as quickly as we can and try to move forward with that. Because part of the challenge with that is the facilities director is not really interested in trying to pursue individual building projects until we hopefully have that arrangement, because he really would like to see any building projects that we're going to be doing moving forward fall under this umbrella of an ESCO, where it can all be managed in a coordinated way across buildings and be more efficient, and we're not doing things piecemeal. So that slows things down a little bit in terms of pursuing building projects, which is why we both have a real interest in trying to make this happen as quickly as we can. So we're really trying to accelerate that process for
Would you
that
say
particular
that
project.
if you got this through and everything went, then it would become more efficient later because you've got one?
That's
the
yes, that's the idea. So
Hmm.
rather than the town tackling facilities projects one-on-one and having each building have a different HVAC system from a different vendor and needing different technicians, which is often the case right now, which is, just happened over the years.
Yeah.
Under an ESCO, you would gradually be moving towards, consolidating those systems across the board, having one building management system. And the other thing the ESCO is designed to do is to improve building efficiencies, as much as the town would like to, and to help you meet your greenhouse gas reduction goals. So you would coordinate with them. They streamline the procurement process. So there's a lot of advantages to it. And they also claim that you'll see financial benefits to it as well through energy efficiency. I'm not quite sure how much we would see in terms of financial savings, but I think we could certainly see gains when it comes to emissions and our buildings and making them more efficient, electrifying them. So.
Okay,
So,
I think we
within-
need to move on because this is going a long time, but Brad, do you have something else you want to say there?
I have a couple more things, yeah. On the committee, both Jerry Frankel and I think Mike McDonald expressed interest in helping out with this. Is it of use to have CAC members, view the RFP or attend a meeting, or at least be connected to the conversations that you have with the facilities director?
Yes, and Jerry and I have talked about that a little bit. And I've talked to the facilities director about that. So yeah, I think there's opportunities, for Jerry and or Mike, if they'd like to be involved in those conversations and be aware of what's happening. Yes.
Cynthia Rainey, I see you have your hand up. Do you have a quick comment, question?
You could probably anticipate my question. Would the schools be included in this?
Good question. in an ideal world, yes.
Well, that's where I live, in the ideal world.
Yeah. So yeah, the short answer is yes, and both the facilities director and I have talked about that and are in agreement that as, you know, technically as municipal buildings, having the schools also included in that ESCO contract, I think would be ideal for a number of reasons. In terms of streamlining things, in terms of gaining efficiencies, in terms of planning projects and capital planning. I have not had any conversations with the schools yet about that. I would certainly like to, and I think my intent is to certainly, you know, as we're doing this research, my intent is to have that conversation with the schools, and I anticipate, you know, would certainly make that offer to have them involved in that. I think that offer would probably include the caveat that, you know, as that school administration and school committee, you know, would certainly still retain their authority over, you know, projects at the school buildings themselves. But I think there can be an argument made for a scale of efficiency on any number of fronts that you could benefit from having the schools involved in that. So yeah, I think that's a conversation that I'm anticipating having with the schools.
Should that happen in August, before you do a report to the town?
Yeah, so I'm currently talking to some of the other town leadership about that and the timing of that and how those conversations need to happen.
And Eric, just for a
Okay.
little low hanging fruit, part of our school facility audit made it clear that we have fluorescence at every elementary school, which is,
My school's got none of that. We're making.
Oh. So I just was wondering if, again, in your conversations with the school administration, if you could, because you have a deadline for a green community grant coming up in October, is that correct?
Yes.
So, and I don't know, I see a lot of their grants are for replacing fluorescents with LEDs and fixing, you know, replace the whole ballast, et cetera. But, you know, it seems like they're fully funded, and that would be a significant reduction in energy use if we got those converted as quickly as possible. You know, I'm surprised but not shocked that they're not converted yet, but
I thought they were converted a few years ago, so
no, they're all,
but I could be wrong.
yeah, all fluorescent.
I was under that impression as well, but I guess maybe it could be wrong too.
I think they did.
So yeah, I did. I have reminded the school administration that there is a green communities opportunity and that I'd be interested in working with them to identify, you know, potential projects and other things at the schools that you could pursue funding for. So I will be continuing to follow up with them in the next few weeks to have, you know, try to schedule a meeting and have a sit down and see what we might be able to identify.
And I'll bring it up the next school committee meeting, but you know, that's nothing that is that intensive, and it's not that extensive amount of work. I mean, it's just.
Yeah, I would love to have some school building projects for green community grants.
Great. Okay, thank you. That's it. Appreciate that.
Okay, we definitely need to move on. I'm falling behind the schedule here. So Jerry, you wrote a great letter for the Route 2 corridor study. Hope everybody's read it. I made a few modifications, or one modification which I think you accepted.
I did.
So
I got yours too, and worked those in. So I guess, question is there any more feedback? Are there any changes or edits we need to make? And if so, we need to decide on them tonight because the deadline for submission of the letter is later this week. I forget the exact date. I just know it's later this week.
25th.
25th, thanks. So today's what, the 22nd,
we're
so
the 22nd now.
not much time.
Yeah, well, I think, personally, I think it's good to go.
I would like to suggest a change.
Brad?
Sorry, Jerry, to have gotten around, I didn't get around to reading the actual Route 2 corridor study until today. I would like to say something much stronger in the study scope, and I'm going to suggest the following wording. The executive summary states that the Route 2 study did not take into account climate goals or any climate-related issues. And for this reason, this version should be rejected and revised to explicitly take into account those goals. That's what I think we should say. I think the study should be sent back to the authors, and when state organizations say, oh, we didn't bother to think about the climate goals, it should be rejected.
Okay, that's a major change to the letter.
Yeah,
It's not,
it
it's
is.
not merely.
Do you feel that's too strong wording?
I don't think so. I mean, the essence of the letter as it currently stands is that we have a climate emergency. And climate doesn't seem to have been factored in, or climate issues do not seem to be factored into any of the existing plans so far. Here are some ideas. So I don't have a problem with what you're describing, except simply the mechanics of it at this point in time. Because if I make the edits of that's a substance, it changes the whole letter. And we have to get to a point of approving it as a committee. So I think it's late in the game for that.
It is late in the game, but I don't think the letter has to be perfect prose. I just wanted to make the point that you make some good suggestions as to some of the things, some of the aspects of climate related stuff that they should have taken into account. But I think we should make the point that this study should be sent back and revised and not taken seriously.
So I'm with you, Brad, but I'm concerned about the mechanics of getting that done and submitting it by the 25th. Because
I can show my
this
text and
committee needs to approve the letter, and that's a change big enough that I'm not comfortable editing that on the fly here tonight.
I've already made the edit and I can share it to you on the screen, or I apologize for not getting around to this. But
there is another good potential reason to say that there's substantive information that has not been included since this study was begun, which is that we have just closed a prison. If we look at the time frame of when that was first proposed to now the last prisoner having been taken out, that was during this study and open comment period. If we look at the design, the proposed design of various access roads and off ramps and things that they've proposed for the Rotary, all of those proposals include the prison property being completely untouched, not to mention that we expect substantial development to occur there, which would totally alter traffic patterns, not just east of us, but potentially also west of us. So, I mean, it's another good reason to suggest that maybe the whole the whole study needs to be redone.
Yeah, I think those are good points. I think I don't have any issues in incorporating that other than the mechanics and the time frame here. However, what I tried to do in the letter was to focus specifically on climate effects, leave transportation effects to the Transportation Committee. But Brad, back to your suggestion or
re-
question
and-
to show it.
And the reason that,
So hold on,
and I'm
hold on. I
happy to
just want
show
to
it.
finish my thought. I'm fine with that. It's a question for you and Janet as chairs of how much time are we gonna allocate to this tonight?
Yeah, but we're already late on the agenda front, but, depends how late people want to stay tonight.
Could I
I
ask?
mean, I think Brad's suggestions were very good. Brad, could you share what you wrote?
I'm happy to share it right here. Host is
Let me-
disabled participant
If we
screen
can see it,
sharing.
hopefully you can see it.
And the reason I'm saying this strongly is, I don't want any money to result towards any of these projects that they are suggesting until they've taken climate into effect. And I don't really know how the state funding works, but I don't, I'll try sharing it again. There we go. There we go. I can do that. It's this one here. Now I have to make it bigger so that you can see it. Sorry, I'm on my laptop here. That's the, did that do it? Okay, make it, make it bigger. Okay. This is the, can you
That's
see it
fine.
on the screen now?
Yes, so is it just the
Um,
blue edit that you're
Yeah.
proposing?
Just this blue two sentence. And it does specifically say that it wasn't like it didn't say that we forgot to do climate. It says we specifically did not take into account climate goals or any of these climate related things.
I would accept that edit. Anybody else have an opinion?
So the. In terms of the structure of the letter, these are almost non sequiturs. Because, I mean, as an example, you make the statement, which I have no issue with the statement. This version should be rejected and revised to explicitly take into account these goals. And then the next sentence says, it is disappointing to see no mention of emissions in the project scope or goals.
That's a good
Right.
point.
Yeah, could I comment? I actually, I was late to the game and I'm new here, so I didn't feel like I could comment, but I think I agree with Brad that stronger language should be used. I would just take out that it is disappointing because,
You could just put it above the blue line,
or just put it above, but
and then you have it all in there.
thinking things like it should or it's disappointing, I think is a little too soft. I think direct kind of requests or asks or saying this is unacceptable, with being cordial and polite and professional, but just
Yeah.
being very clear that it's not just, oh, we're disappointed, too bad, but no, this is actually unacceptable. I think is where I would lean.
So that makes sense to me.
Okay.
I think we have similar issues with the rest of the letter. It's not quite as explicit. But for example,
Yeah, we're troubled, yeah.
yeah, we are troubled, the next paragraph.
Right.
We are troubled by the expected increase in traffic, and I talk about, induced demand. It's immaterial. If we want to say, stop this thing,
Mhm.
because this study is no longer valid, then it's awkward. I mean, we could send out an awkward letter. It
Well,
doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm just pointing out that it's,
I think
we're.
in a
we're
way,
looking at this from two different perspectives.
yeah,
with-
I would say that the study scope was sort of directly addressing the fact that the study is fundamentally flawed. But then I kind of, the way I read it at least, was that when you get into the sort of details of capacity and congestion, impact of electric, those are more the rationale that backs up that paragraph that says it's flawed. So I think it's okay if the language is a little bit
Yeah.
softer there, because it's really just the rationale behind the stronger statement,
Okay,
if that makes sense. That's the way I read it, but others probably have different opinions.
Brad, you had another comment?
I was gonna say the same thing that, that's Catherine there, right? I think she
Yeah.
said. I think, it's a more constructive letter if we say it didn't take into account climate. And here's and following with several things relating to climate that it didn't take into account. I think that should be fine.
Your summary statement sort of says the same.
Yeah.
Including, we sort of reiterates, the changes. This is of it. There's the impact on emissions. It sort of summarizes it.
Right. So. If this is what, as a committee, we want to do, I'm fine with it.
So.
So-
Do I hear a motion, whether you
Well,
want
so
to
let's
accept
just
this?
read, so, I think the capacity and congestion first sentence has to be changed again to, because,
Well, we need to change it then.
right, I mean, again, because we're
Yeah.
it's, we can even just say the expected increase, we could even just say, make it. Like, take out what we are troubled by, just say the expected increase in the traffic. Oh. I guess we can't say that, but
Yeah, it
Um,
needs a little more work.
yeah, increased capacity will lead to increased traffic, make effort to reduce it.
So.
Okay,
What I've done in the past with situations like this is, which I don't know if it's completely kosher or not, but I would take committee's comments and do an offline edit with the pre-approval of the committee such that, with the pre-approval of the committee, that I'm not making any changes outside of that scope discussed in the committee meetings.
That will
So-
be fine by me.
Paul,
But,
Paul had, I think, wanted to make a comment. I
Paul.
Just didn't know if you
yeah,
saw
I thought little
that.
hands up there, I don't know. So Paul, what do you want to contribute something?
Yeah, hi. No, I'm sorry I joined at 7:30. No, I agree that with Brad's concern here. But I think if you just add like a third sentence there, something like below are also some improvements we think should be made in the study. And then it could just read as is.
Can you repeat that, please?
So something like you say below.
Yep, something like, below are some additional improvements we think should be made in the study,
The revised study that we're calling.
in the revised study.
Improvements which should be
Also made in the
um,
revised study, or
also
some wording like,
included.
also included.
included.
consider
Was
whatever,
considered in the,
consider,
In the, also considered in the
in a
study.
revised,
Revised.
in a revised study.
Okay, climate related, should I say? Or, okay, this is cool. I think that's good. And I think Jerry should have,
Right,
should have
so I'm-
if a word needs to be changed to make it just a little bit tighter, but it has exactly kind of this messaging, then I think it's great, and I would approve it. I would.
So I move that
Make
we
them-
accept the letter as amended here tonight. With the understanding that moderate changes might be made that are not inconsistent with what was stated at our meeting. To support the changes that we made tonight. That sound like a fair motion?
Yeah.
Do I hear
I'll
do I hear a
second
second? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
That's
Aye.
unanimous. All right. Moving on.
Okay.
that. One thing real quickly.
Okay,
Brad, can you forward me that file, please?
Absolutely.
okay, so the next thing,
yeah.
we're about 20 minutes late on the predicted timing. So update on emissions inventory, Brad, that's your,
I'm gonna save a little bit of
can you
time
stop
here.
sharing too, please, when you get a
Oh,
chance?
okay. I'm gonna save a little bit of time here. I'll give you a quick update. I sent the copy of the presentation I made that is about the emissions study, and I didn't get around to updating some of the accompanying documentation yet. Wanted to mention a couple of things. I had I was just short of time this month, but I did have a conversation with a man I know in Stowe, who is working on the same emissions for their town, another NLP community, and he pointed out a couple things that might be inconsistent, not about our version this in for 2022, but about a previous version, and I have to look at that, reconcile that to make sure that there wasn't an error made. And I'm going to try to get to that when I get back from vacation.
Okay, so we'll hear from you next
Yeah.
meeting. Okay,
So can I just make one comment? So during the roundtable and the discussion around the inventory and emissions, there's observation comment made about how Concord has gone to carbon-free electricity and how does that impact some of that information and within our green communities reporting, for our building. So I did reach out to Green Communities about that and about the MEI. So they, it sounds like Wellesley has had some of the same questions. And so they told me that we can use different grid emission factors in MEI. So anyway, that's something I can follow up with, but I just want to let you know, I checked in with Green Communities and MEI. We can follow up with them to see how we can account for that moving forward.
Okay. Is there somebody somebody we should meet with to tell us exactly how to do that, or have you figured it out how to do it?
Haven't figured it out yet. The short answer I got from the Green Communities program was in their words, the interim answer is that we may use whatever emission factors that our MLP forecast, but that during future annual reports, you might see differences on the total calculated emission reductions through electrification in the MEI system. So they said they're going to discuss it more further internally in the next few weeks there in Green Communities. So they may have more to share with us on that, but they did give us that interim answer, and I'm happy to forward that to you.
Cool. Nice.
okay, so next thing is the climate action and resilience plan, starting with the built environment. Fran, you want to start talking on that? And I have when I have the document in front of me, so I can read it off, but I'm
Well,
not quite sure. I mean, I'm not sure how to lead this discussion, put it that way.
I wanted to make sure that everybody on the committee, knows where the plan is, has taken a look at it at some level. Has everybody had a chance to read it, either recently or in the past?
Yep.
Yeah, I went through it again the last couple of days. And we have made some progress. I mean, we have increased the electrification and energy efficient of residential buildings. We've got a long way to go, but we're doing what we can. And we're just talking about energy performance of commercial buildings. Well, we did talk about municipal buildings.
Yeah.
Commercial buildings, I don't think we made much progress at all. We established policies and incentives for new development to achieve high standards. We've certainly done that in getting the new building code through. So there's no gas infrastructure, no fossil fuel infrastructure in any new buildings. As for,
Um,
I'm not sure about the answer
So-
to increasing the waste diversion rate at all. So,
Well, let's first step back, and maybe I should share this graph on emissions,
Yeah.
which is from that report, which is, I don't know if does it come out? Well,
yeah,
I
it's
think you
pretty well.
can see it. I don't know if it's blocked by something there.
Can you hit present just so it gets a little bit bigger,
Okay,
or is it a PDF?
it's maybe I should have just, okay, there we go. So so built environment is a few things. It is residential buildings, that's 1/3 of emissions. Commercial building, that's 28% of emissions, and municipal buildings, which is a couple of percent of emissions. And it also includes the waste, which are this 4% up at the top, and wastewater treatment. So so just to put things in perspective, and the where did that go? In on just sorry, gotta get that. So we're talking on these the priority actions. Every one of these areas has a number of priority actions that Janet was reading. And a lot of our effort has been on electrification of residential buildings, because that's the biggest chunk there. Although commercial buildings is almost as big. Now, we could drill down and talk as in the committee. We allocated half an hour to talk through this. We could talk through in the committee about answering questions about each one of those. Is what I was going to suggest as to what role does what's been done, what role does CAC have in it, and what role could CAC have in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes. I think so. So I don't know, Eric, do you have data on how many residential buildings are now electrified? Was the CMLP have that?
I don't have that at my fingertips. Was that data we had gotten from the assessor's office, or was that just about oil heat versus other?
The assessor's database lists the heating source of a building at the time when the assessor's database was last updated. And we, of course, got the assessor's database from 2022. We should get a new one for 2023, as of, or let's say January 1st of 2024, and see how it's changed. What we noticed from 2019 to 2022 was that there were fewer houses on oil and a few more on gas. So there's been still some change of people switching from oil to gas, a little less than before. And it also lists people who have electric heat, or which is generally heat pump heat. The problem is with the assessor's databases, it's not very accurate.
I was gonna say, where do they get the data from? The engineering department or building department? Where do they get their data from?
Well, your house can can have a visit from the assessor when you pull a permit, or every so often. But that's why the assessor's database is not perfect. And so a combination of the assessor's database and what CMLP reports on how many people who have installed heat pumps year by year is what's, it gives better information. Additionally, perhaps, the with new smart meters at all homes, we could in principle know how much heat is being electrified, because CMLP could know, you know, on a short-term basis, how much electricity is flowing into all those houses. Although that's a challenging project, not necessarily entirely possible or achievable.
Well, that data it strikes me would be, let's see how to put this. It's almost in the noise for what we're looking to achieve. The pie chart showed that 30-some% was residential energy. So if we're looking at refining or putting some effort into refining that number by some extra project for CMLP, I'm not sure how much of a difference it's really going to make in terms of our results or our decision making. You know, we know that we have a tall task to get, I'll say it's 33%, get 33% down towards zero.
Right.
And having more precise measurements right now won't hurt, but it doesn't really add much to that effort.
Right. One of the challenges is, so for natural gas, because everybody who buys natural gas gets it from National Grid, they can tell us how much natural gas flowed to residential customers in town. And that number is accurate. Whereas for oil, a lot of people have been switching from oil to heat pumps. And we don't know how many oil deliveries there were. And so I don't, you know, it's, we're kind of the analysis of emissions that led to that 33% as being the number for 2022 is pretty inaccurate for oil heated homes. Maybe a lot of those homes had heat pumps and the analysis didn't really reflect that so much.
Well, when people put in heat pumps, is there any information about whether they have gas and they're switching over to heat pumps, or whether they have oil and switching over to heat pumps? Is there anybody that collects that data?
Good question. I wonder about the heat pump coaches. They may have some insight.
They would have insight, that's for sure. Yeah.
So at the light plant, Pamela Katie collects or let's say the processing of rebates, collects information about what heat you are transferring from and to, and what your expected heating load from the heat pump system is, whether it be, you know, a small system, 50% system, an 80% system, or 100% system. So there is a lot of information that we can bring together. And I've seen it last year. I just haven't had a recent update.
Can I ask a question
Now-
just about, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm gonna.
Well, just in terms of what is the CAC's role vis-a-vis the heat pump coaches in terms of getting data from them, feedback on the program? Is there any, do we have any interface with that program at all, or is that totally kind of a
Yeah, we
CMLP?
do. So there's, I can never remember her name. So Janice Setti, who works at the light plant, she oversees all of their like energy efficiency programs, along with Pamela, who processes a lot of the rebates and incentives. And I communicate regularly with Jan and, you know, as well as Brad and the committee have communicated with her. And, you know, one of the things I see looking at these prioritized actions is that the first two, you know, I think it would be great to sit down with Jan and CMLP and sort of, and I've actually reached out to her about this, and would hope that the committee would be involved is, you know, looking forward, looking at what we're doing now and looking forward. And so for residential and commercial, what, you know, what is working, what isn't, and where do we want to go with this? Because CMLP is a key player with that. You know, the rebates and incentives that they offer are coming from the ratepayers and, you know, other things. So it's, you know, it's their budget and their programs, and Jan manages those programs. So it's not, so it's certainly something we need to communicate with her about, and, you know, would love to get more of a sense from her about, you know, how we can continue to try to make progress on these fronts. So I don't know.
I did reach out to her because that was one of my to-dos, regarding the greenhouse dwarfs, and she had a bunch of, you know, some recommendations in her report. I guess she had already submitted to you, she said, and to Brad, but so.
Yeah, so yeah, I'd love to have sort of a high level conversation with her, you know, because I think she needs to be involved in this process too, of reviewing the plan when it comes to things like this, because again, they're an integral partner. When it comes to some of these efforts, so. So I said, I've reached out to her, just to see if we could have a sit down, and I'd certainly, you know, think it'd be great if, anybody from the committee wanted to join us on that.
She sounds like
This
she's
is like-
very busy.
Yeah, she is.
Right.
She is.
Yeah, I was
She
gonna
seems
say,
overwhelmed.
it's hard to think about, you know, adding another meeting, but it would be so fantastic if there's like, you know, one of our meetings, she could like report out, even if she came just for 15 minutes and had to leave or something. I'm just curious how we get that, you know.
Yeah.
that energy.
Well,
That's
I like to think Jan sees the committee as a partner and a resource.
Yeah.
So for example, the Green Home Tours, which was largely, you know, organized by the committee. You know, I think they were very appreciative of the committee taking the lead role on that and making that happen, because it supported their programs and their goals.
Right.
So I think there's certainly opportunities there. I just think that obviously they need to be part of that, you know, that conversation and have the opportunity for input moving forward on that, because they're the ones who are, you know, often doing these programs and setting up these rebates and incentives and things like that. So, you know, so.
Right, and I see our role as helping to normalize electrification, and the Green Home Tours are definitely a part of that. Other outreach that we can do through the newspaper or through creative work to just to show that people are doing this. You can do it too. Because, you know, it's not on everybody's radar. But a few years ago, people didn't think this was possible. You know, people got up at town meeting and said, I don't think it's possible to do this. And so that's one of the places where I see CAC fitting in.
Well, one of my thoughts is to maybe update a little bit and redistribute this little pamphlet. Your sustainable home now. I found 3 copies on my shelf. That's all I have.
Oh.
So I actually
I-
have some old.
You actually have some
Someone
more?
can put them to use.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if
Maybe I
they,
should deliver them
Um,
to Jan.
I mean, it doesn't need a lot of updating. But to reprint them and make them, you know, available. You know, we have the library. When we do tabling events, we can have these to hand out, things like that. So I don't know whether other people think that's a good idea to,
I think it's a good idea. It's worth something, definitely. I have the other 3 copies at home, I think.
It's the one
Well,
in
I
Visitor
think
this
Center.
is-
all I've
This
got.
is the, the image that we used for that we took. that was
So
all
I
from-
think, we need to have somebody volunteering to take a look at it and see, go through it carefully. And see what needs updating. So if anybody wants to volunteer to do that, that would be nice.
I'd be happy to take a look at it.
Okay, thank you, Brett.
May I keep this?
Of course. Yes.
Don't
I
go
don't
selling it
know.
on eBay.
You know, the problem with things, I mean, these are great to have, but it's also great if all this information is on the town's website.
It is.
All of this.
That is,
and
yeah.
This is
That
like this, because I know
specifically,
this format
Yeah.
is difficult, I know, for some other stuff that the
But
town
the
has.
trouble with having it on, not
But it-
having it, trouble is that it's hard to find.
Yeah,
And that was the second request I made to Jan, along with the first one, was can she and I sit down and look over all our web pages, because there's a lot of overlap between web pages and they are not necessarily clear or intuitive and repetitive, and there needs to be a lot of work done. So I've invited
That's
her to
true.
sit down and look through the pages with me. I mean, there's some sustainability pages that I can certainly tackle on my own, but there's a lot of links between CMLP pages and sustainability
Mhm.
pages, and you get down rabbit holes and you don't know where you are.
Yeah,
So there needs to be
that's
some work done.
absolutely true. I struggle with it a lot. for
So
a long time.
I'm
But there's
planning to
also,
sit down with her
there's
about that, too.
also, things that need to be updated. There are broken links.
Yeah.
All sorts of things that need to be updated, so maybe your intern can help out with that. I don't know.
That's-
they're also, when they were doing the housing thing for the town, I'm trying to think of that we had to do because we have the two train stations to comply with the state law that we voted at the last town meeting, right? They had their own little sort of signature right up front to get to all that stuff. I mean, if we're saying sustainability is an emergency, it would be great if we would have a real summary page on the front of the town. So that we could get all this information for people.
I love that idea.
Me too.
Yeah.
I
mean,
love it.
They're talking on the
The
homepage.
sustainability
Yeah, I mean,
page,
it had-
really
yeah, the
hard,
town
you know,
homepage.
right on the, on the home
Town's
page, it
committed.
would
It's a
be
big
nice
deal.
to have
Yeah.
some direction to the sustainability pages.
But in a motivating way. I don't think it should just say, this is an emergency. That could be demotivating potentially. We have to figure out.
I think just to
But-
get to it, I mean, it's to your
Yeah.
point, it's hard to get to this stuff. When
Right.
when that was there, you got to it and it had all this stuff, it had, meetings were being there, it was just, everything was laid out for you. And it would be nice to have all of that stuff laid
Yeah.
out in one spot. Easy access.
Good idea.
Yeah, that's great. And I would just add that I think this is really phenomenal. The more sort of quotes or personal testimonies, I think is more impactful. Like I love the case studies that are on the site about, air pump, heat pumps, sorry. Just anything that, shows people are doing this, that this isn't just theoretical, I think is useful.
Jan has some of those.
Yeah,
And highlighting successes along the way. Like, and this could be on the website or through social media, but when someone like the West Concord Union Church goes fully electric, people should hear about that. People should know in Concord should know that the library is planning to be fully electric by 2030. And so this is the kind of stuff that I think we should think about how to make it accessible and make people hear about it and be proud of it.
I mean, we've spoken about getting articles in the Bridge. I've not seen anything, or I don't remember seeing anything in the Bridge about the West Concord Church having gone fully electric. Or, the library, all that it has done. And we should speak to people at the church and see if we can write an article about what they've done and submit it to the Bridge.
Yeah.
And I
So-
guess I could try and do that. I don't know. I'm not a
Yeah.
church goer. I don't know anybody there, but it's not far from where I live.
Go in there, stand up. No.
So on a
I'm sure, I'm sure
related
some of
note,
them will, but they'll tell me who's in charge then.
on a related note, addressing the commercial buildings. An idea was suggested to me some time ago that we could, one idea of addressing commercial buildings would be to have some sort of a, lack of a better term, an award or a recognition of a business that, you know, went all electric. So much like we're describing here, making some noise about the church or the library, same could apply for businesses. And that might
Yeah.
be, I'm sure it wouldn't be a huge motivation, but it would be a positive motivation for them to get some extra attention. So I think to do that, though, we would need to have some sort of, we would need to plan the program out of what the award looks like and how often is it given out and what are the criteria, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a similar thing that, you know, we need to draw attention to the folks and the institutions that are actively making a difference.
So how do we learn about what commercial buildings or owners of commercial buildings have done?
It's a good question.
Well, the churches count as commercial buildings, by the way. And commercial buildings do apply for rebates for the equipment they install.
Yeah.
And maybe if there aren't so many, it'll be easier to pick the awardees.
There's also a town business roundtable group.
Oh, yeah.
Michael, are you still on the phone? You met with them, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. Do you remember the name of that group?
There's the Concord Business Partnership.
I think that's it, Concord Business Partnership.
Yeah, I met with them last year. We actually did a workshop for them, well, called a workshop. They have, I think, monthly meetings, and we invited them to come, and I invited CMLP, and we talked about incentives and energy efficiency and electrification. I had people from National Grid there. And I didn't get a whole lot of follow-up from that community, you know, because it's very much a dollar and cents community.
Yeah.
Which is understandable.
No.
You know, but we actively, you know, reached out to them, and, you know, I still keep in touch with them. Every now and then I'll share opportunities with them that I see, you know, with their group. And, but there's, yeah, I'm sure there's more that can be done.
So follow-up
with
is,
them, communicating with them.
So Michael,
follow-up
do you have
should be
something?
from us to them. It
Yeah,
shouldn't be from
I
them to
agree.
us.
I'll just chime in for a second on that. I think it was 3 years ago, I did present to that group. I think one of the issues is there was some interest. It was nascent interest. It was, hey, thanks for the information. We'll get back to you, sort of thing. They have all the contacts at CMLP. They have the appropriate contacts at National Grid. But I think where it's fallen flat is that there's not a sustained momentum there. They just move on, you know, they're moving on to their business, their day-to-day activities. So I guess, Brad, you were about to say, to follow up with that, if there is any way we can sustain that momentum after the meeting, I'm not sure what that would be, either through CML, you have to excuse me, I'm working out on my bike, either through CMLP or through National Grid or someone in the committee. I think that would pay some dividends, because right now we've had these meetings once per year, and then it's one and done, and there's no, you know, there's no sustained follow-up. So I'm not sure how that would be, if we would do that with the committee, or through the energy efficiency reps at CMLP or National Grid, but that's my thought anyways, that it needs some sort of follow-up.
Yeah.
So I just want to mention that if you're not aware, the state is, I believe in 2025, next year, they have a new large building energy reporting policy. So buildings over 20,000 square feet are going to need to report It's a law, the law that requires electric, gas, and steam utilities to report usage data on behalf of buildings over 20,000 square feet to the state. So any of these large commercial buildings are going to have to annually report their utility data to the state. So hopefully that'll be a source of data, and I'm imagining that we would hopefully be able to, get that data from the state for Concord. Specifically, I don't know too much about it there yet, but the law said the law went into effect on July 1st of this year. And the first usage reports are going to be required by next year, in 2025. So there might be some more data regarding large buildings that we could access, for the buildings here in Concord that should be reported to the state. And then I also wanted to mention that.
Could you send us a link about that
Yes.
new law?
Yeah.
That information would be nice.
Yeah, it was under the 2022 Act, Driving Clean Energy and Offshore Wind. It's part of that that was passed in 2022. And I also just wanted to mention that I'm participating in a cohort on building performance standards, which is something that some other communities have used as kind of a policy tool to get larger building owners to come up with strategic plans for improving their buildings, and they have, benchmarks. I don't know a whole lot yet, but I'm hoping that by participating in this cohort over the next year, which is being sponsored by new Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, that I'll just learn a little bit more about that and see whether that's a policy tool that might make sense at all here in Concord. I have no idea if it is, but just doing a little homework on that.
Yeah, and I would say, Eric, that's kind of the buzzword these days, of these strategic energy management plans. And it's a great hook. It's something that's written down, it's got goals, and it's something you can keep coming back to every whatever it might be and say, hey, so how are we doing here? You had a goal of 10% over the next couple of years. They've bought into the goal. What is it that's holding you up? But all of that takes time, and it takes, it takes attention. Yeah. But, that is the industry standard now, is tailored toward these SEMPs, these strategic energy management plans.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping to learn by participating in this, is what sort of resources are required, and looking at models from other places that have done it, to see whether it's something that would make sense here or not. So
does that also get at that third thing about the sustainability standards for new municipal buildings and schools? Is that part of that cohort's vision, or is that?
I'm not sure about that.
It absolutely is. And I know, for National Grid anyway, there is someone in the company that is focused on working with communities in developing a higher level SEMP agreement, strategic energy management plans. So they would sit down with you, Eric, for example. They don't necessarily have to sit down with the library, the fire department, and the wastewater treatment plant separately, but they might sit down with you and say, hey, so Concord has goals here. What sort of outreach can we do to certain buildings? And that rep from National Grid, or whoever it might be, Eversource, would be the person holding your feet to the fire, if you will. So that's always a possibility. These utilities they have goals that they have to meet. So there's some self-interest there. But that's an idea. Eric, I can put you in touch with the person from National Grid if you'd like. She'd be more than happy to work with you on that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I'm interested in learning more. Obviously we've had limited success with a carrot approach commercially, and so I don't know if exploring more policy tools might be useful looking down the road.
Yeah, and these are, ultimately these are backed with incentives and money. So that's usually a pretty good carrot for businesses.
Yeah.
So I wanted to mention on these priority actions for the built environment, there's one potentially large missing one. And it's cool because it was invented since 2020. And it's the network geothermal. It's the idea that, oh, we could potentially electrify a whole bunch of buildings in an area of town. It's not on this list. It's missing because they didn't come up with the idea. But it's happening in Framingham, and we'll actually talk about it a little bit later. And I would like to have a goal, if we update the plan in 2025, of knowing whether we should include that, whether this is a priority action for Concord. Not on the plan yet.
It's expensive. I think that's a big part of the problem, Brad, and everyone acknowledges that network geothermal is, the next big thing out there because it is so efficient. It's just so darn expensive. Now, National Grid has their pilot study ongoing in Lowell, and Eversource has theirs in Framingham.
Yeah.
And once the data comes out on that, then they're going to report back to the DOER and look at some sort of incentive arrangement. So, I mean, there's nothing to stop a municipality from just doing it and paying for it, but it's very expensive.
Right.
Michael, do you know when Framingham or Lowell will have their report ready?
Well, I think Eversource is a little ahead of National Grid's in Framingham, and they're looking at data now, but typically one season's worth of data can provide the information they're looking at, and then there's looking at the data, understanding it, interpreting it, and then it goes to the policy sausage making process and comes out with an incentive. But I would, just spitballing here, I would say probably within the next 6 to 8 months or so, we should start hearing something about that.
The homes aren't connected. Framingham Loop is finished, but they are connecting homes to the loop now. So I think it'll be probably a year before, or it'll be after a heating season.
After a heating season and a cooling season too. National Grid is I think they'll be done, or they have finished with their connections in a couple of locations. So I think you're right, Brad. It's probably going to be a little bit longer than that.
Yeah. So back to the priority actions, I would say the fourth one on this is pretty much done. Thanks to the state and the new stretch code, and then the specialized stretch code and the fossil-free pilot. I don't know, this could be one that gets checked off and removed from, or gets, not much more to do if we updated the report, the plan next year.
Can you repeat, or it's the fourth one, is that the established policies and incentives for new development, or I just want to make sure?
Exactly. So for new development and major renovation now needs to be fossil fuel free, and any new development has much higher energy efficiency standards in terms of the HERS rating, how much heat loss there is from your building.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So we established policies and incentives, but we haven't necessarily fully implemented or made them required 100%. If developers can ask for waivers for this and that they get passed, then I guess if there's one thing to establish a policy, and there's another thing to make sure that 100% of it is implemented.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure, knowing that, one of the 40B projects, the big developers are asking for waivers for this idea of a brand new development having to be 100%. So, I don't know where that stands. I'm not following that closely, but I do know that they've asked for a waiver to get away with it. So I just want to be clear, you know, that we're keeping an eye on
Yeah.
these things and that we don't just say, check, you know,
Yeah.
success.
The development of Baker Avenue, that one was all electric to begin with. And so I assume it still is. And I have no idea about the status of the one that they want to build. The Surrey Club.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's-
so I think I believe they had a waiver request in as part of their application to the planning department, and I think they were asking for a waiver so that they wouldn't have the specialized stretch code apply. I think the good news is that a lot of times in order to get a waiver, you're gonna need to make a financial argument and say that, you know, it's financially, you can't do it in the greenest way possible, or it's too expensive to do it that way. And I think that argument has become less and less reasonable. I mean, so for example, you have the other 40B who's saying we're going fully electric. So for somebody else to come in and say, we can't do that, you know, and it's a similar scale, you say, well, here's a case right in town to show that you probably can if you really want to. And I think you're gonna see more and more of that as you see larger and larger developments happening that are all electric. And there's other examples in other towns, even in Boston, about affordable housing where it's all electric and affordable. So I think it's gonna probably be harder and harder for developers to make that financial burden case.
So
I
Eric,
think, yeah,
so the waiver you're talking about, I hadn't heard about that. That's a waiver from the specialized stretch code? Because they applied for permits before the fossil free thing went into effect.
that's correct. So the specialized code was already in effect, and so I believe what they were requesting a waiver for was not to have to adhere to the specialized stretch code.
How do we hear about that except at a committee meeting? Had you heard about that when they asked you?
That was part of a somewhat lengthy ongoing conversation between myself and the select board where I was being asked sort of what authority did the town have when it came to 40B projects to, insist that projects be electric. And at the time it was, well, we can't say that based on the fossil fuel free program because that wasn't in effect yet. So they can request a waiver. But it's sort of up to the planning board and others to determine whether they're willing to grant that or not. Although with 40Bs, it's a little bit different because there's some state considerations. Given that it's a 40B project, where, if the town says one thing, they could potentially appeal to the state who could override it, I think. So in 40Bs, it's a little bit trickier. But that was a request that was brought to my attention a little while ago.
I was just wondering if something like that is brought to your attention, can you bring it to ours? And then one of us can go to planning board meeting and weigh in on it.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And do you talk to the planning board saying, pushing the no fossil fuel option or requirement?
Yeah, so I've written some memos to the select board, suggesting that they should not be granted a waiver.
Okay,
Again, citing that the other 40B project and, saying that,
okay,
because they weren't, when they made the waiver request, they were just simply stating it as a list of requests or exemptions for their project. So that's all, it was literally one line or one box on a chart, just saying that they intended to request that waiver.
right.
And so there was no reasoning given behind it in terms of whether it was a financial argument or otherwise. I think they were just inserting it at the time to say,
Reserving.
we're going on record and we're reserving the right to make that request.
I went to the site visit
Yeah.
and I asked about the the use of fossil fuels or not, and they just, I mean, they look as if they'd never even
Yeah.
occurred to them to think about it, so.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's, or whatever. But I think we should move on to the implementation steps, which we,
But I do
Which-
think something like that is something we should, that's one we should be fighting for as a committee, whether it's at the planning board or something else, because it sets a precedent that if
Mhm.
they start getting waivers, I mean, if
yes.
the planning board gives
Mhm.
waivers, I mean, there was one recently near my, and people were very adamant about it, and then the waiver went, then they did not allow the waiver for totally other reasons. My point is, it's sometimes if the town is going to be has to decide between going to a lawsuit or applying a waiver, they might just say, it's easier to do the waiver. And so I think if people make the argument, they're less likely to do the waiver, or they might be less likely. So I
Right,
think it's
we-
something,
we-
it's worth in some of these instances for us to, in some,
We should make our voices heard, I agree.
What is the status and timeline on that?
I do not know offhand where that process is at the moment. There were certainly, I also had inquiries from a number of people within like the housing authority and housing community who had concerns about that. So I was kind of communicating with them as well, and I know they were, I think, making their voices known in some of these hearings that
Thank you.
the project should not, should be fossil fuel free or.
I have a point of information, if I could, Brad.
Please.
Yeah, I was aware of the waiver on the 40B project. And there's a zoning board meeting on Thursday, the 25th, where that's going to be discussed. So if you're interested in seeing if the waiver gets approved or not, you might wish to attend the zoning board meeting on Thursday night.
Thank you.
Is there anybody that can do that? That would be good.
I think I could.
Use the word emergency
Okay.
or Article 31 or something.
I'm gonna be
Hey,
around.
thanks, Ron.
I can-
Very good.
Thank you.
Should we take any kind of formal action empowering you to speak on behalf of the whole committee? Rather than just yourself as an
That's a
individual?
good idea. We should have a motion to request that they not approve the override of the zoning requirements, the no fossil fuel, please say something and phrase it better than I am.
You would definitely attend.
I can attend.
I would move that we empower our co-chair, Janet, to speak at the zoning board in opposition to this on behalf of the whole committee. Specifically in opposition to granting a waiver, given that we have a climate emergency and have a good reason to have a moratorium in place.
Is there a second?
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
I'll be standing right behind you, Janet, to give you support.
Thank you. All right.
So let's get to the,
Was that unanimous? I think it was. I
Yes.
didn't hear any stuff. Okay.
yes.
I think it was. Oh, I didn't hear from Mike. Did he chime in?
Mike is muted.
I
you-
second.
Okay.
All right, okay.
Aye.
That's cool. Thank you. Okay, so I think we've only got about 10 minutes left, so.
Yeah.
Quickly go to implementation steps, which,
I do want to get to the network geothermal because I am going to propose that we apply for a grant next month on an investigation for Concord. So I don't want to get to the end of the meeting without getting to that point.
Okay, so you want to say that again?
You want us to make
The-
sure that he gets to the next
I
agenda.
want to
item.
make sure we talk
Oh,
about
you
the
want to
network
next one,
geothermal at the level
geothermal
so that
next
we
month.
might,
Okay, we can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we have time to spend on that tonight.
No, I think he does want, to clarify, you want to spend time tonight or you want to defer?
I want to spend time tonight because I want to urge Eric to apply for a grant or help Eric apply for a grant to do a study on this,
Okay,
if the committee agrees.
all right. Well, do you want to talk about, you have a walkthrough you want to talk about?
Oh, well, we had, so we had a discussion, together with Jerry and Brian Folds and Bob Shatton. I think that was everybody, unless Jerry corrects me, about network geothermal. And there's a lot we need to learn about it. We want to understand whether there is a business model that can work, and to understand the technology well enough to see about advancing potential opportunities for network geothermal along the model of what's been somewhat different model, if need be. Now, there's a lot of pilot projects that are getting funded that are in the infancy. They're just at the thought experiment level, or maybe slightly beyond the two projects, the one that Mike spoke about in Lowell and in Framingham, where they're actually breaking ground and building stuff. But the challenge is in Concord that we have a municipal electric utility and an investor-owned gas utility. So it's kind of it's a different beast. But and so we need to understand those business aspects. We sort of set a goal of trying to produce a report for the town summarizing the technology and the business model and potential opportunities in a few months' time. That's a little bit vague. Now, Laura Davis has been thinking about this for a while, and she spoke at the forum together with Audrey Schulman from the nonprofit HEAT. And HEAT has done a lot of really great work on kind of advancing this type of proposal for a number of reasons. Not all of which necessarily applied to Concord because of our special circumstances, but in terms of giving the utilities having a heat as a business, as opposed to just gas or electricity. So one of the things which we talked about at our meeting, and Brian is on the light board, although he wasn't speaking for the light board, he knows the utility model. We were thinking it would be very cool if CMLP could supply electricity and also could supply heat to buildings. And as another business. Now, the technology of geothermal heating systems is pretty advanced. People know how to drill wells, people know how to build the equipment. There's always improvements going on, there's new products and all that stuff. But and there are district geothermal systems in universities and in places in Europe and stuff like that, but it's a new thing in the United States. So the Framingham project is the first kind of residential commercial level geothermal network in the US, which is very exciting. It's right down the road. A lot we can learn from that. There's options on, on bringing in a third party, something called a thermal energy partnership agreement that could help us do a pilot and a limited scale pilot and evaluate it and figure out, is this something for Concord or is it not? There's some really great opportunities potentially like MCI Concord, which will be developed in a few years. And that might be too far out to be a first pilot project. That's kind of that's a pretty large area, but maybe we could find a small pilot project to do first. If we could, if there's potentially a good business model, and if we could get grant funds to kind of get us off the starting block. He'd awarded like 10 grants to different communities around the state, including Acton nearby. They have got $50,000 to investigate doing a network geothermal project, and they're working on that. And also Cambridge and Arlington and Boston and quite a number around the state. So I want us to continue working on this and have a working group. And if multiple people in the committee want to do a working group, we can set up a subcommittee and publicize it, because it would be good to bring in other talented people in town, especially people who have a good business sense or an entrepreneurial sense, or other talents. Community engagement is really important to figure out how to do, because you gotta kind of come to terms with how would you do this in a neighborhood, or what sort of neighborhood you should do this in. And so I'd like to propose that we consider applying for a grant as part of the EECBG or another grant to bring in a consultant to help us do some business modeling and to do some community engagement and figure out what might be a good pilot project to start with. That might be a 3-year time scale project where we could get something built if we could generate the interest. That's, and my level of proposal is that's about as far as I've gone. However, I think putting together a proposal would be quick. It could be something we could do in a couple of weeks' time and get it in time for that energy efficiency community block grant application. Unless, Eric, you have a better one that you want to apply for, something specific.
So, well, I've explored a couple pathways on this, including the network geothermal. So I haven't had a chance to share this with you yet, but I did talk to the Green Communities, our regional coordinator, about this particular idea with the EECBG. Unfortunately, he didn't seem to be too hot on it for this particular opportunity. His take was that feasibility studies under something like this would usually be for like a single building or a single project based, versus something bigger, like something networked. He seemed to think it might be more suitable for looking forward for like the Climate Leaders Program, which we're hoping to apply for this fall as the next step in green communities. Of course, he mentioned the Kickstart program with HEAT, which he just mentioned.
He is who? He is Devin. What's his name?
Dylan.
Dylan. Yes, Dylan.
Yeah, Dylan. you know, I mean, he seemed excited by the concept of doing something like that here and looking at it here in a light plant community. Because he actually used to work on network geothermal before joining DOER. So, you know, he's versed in it. He just seemed to have some skepticism about like the feasibility of this getting funded in this particular opportunity. He mentioned like the municipal energy technical assistance that program that DOER has is something that might make more sense for this. But again, I just had this conversation with him, so I haven't really had a chance to even share this with you yet.
Yeah, I would have loved to be on the call, actually.
Yeah, well, I had a call with him where I was discussing a number of things, and so I thought I'd take the opportunity to bring that up and see what he had to say about it as a concept. And obviously, I'm sure, you know, you could certainly have another conversation with him about that in particular. And for you know, other pathways for this opportunity is I talked to the facilities director about you know, pursuing some building envelope project work over public safety. Although he had some reluctance, as I mentioned before, about pursuing individual building projects leading up to his anticipation of trying to go with an ESCO. And I think they were also, I think the expectation was that if you were going to do any kind of a building project or building envelope project, that you would have at least a level 2 ASHRAE audit of the building, which we don't currently have for that building, but that's, you know, what we're trying to get to with these building audits. And I had also floated the idea over to CMLP about, you know, possibly doing something related to a feasibility study for some of the work that the Solar Task Force did on potential municipal solar sites. But I did not hear anything back from them in terms of feedback on that, because that would probably involve either the high school roof or that drainage swale between BD and the high school, both of which are under school control and both of which have had reluctance from the schools to go forward on anything with that. So I don't imagine at this point that we would have their buy-in and support to necessarily pursue a feasibility study at this point. So I'm in, and you know, I also had some follow-up conversations with a couple other communities, you know, about, you know, what other people were thinking and were they looking for collaborative opportunities, but I haven't really landed on anything with any of them at this point. I think people are sort of in the same, people I talked to were kind of in the same boat about, you know, trying to determine where they could go with this. And it was emphasized to me by Green Communities that they're really emphasizing projects that are going to serve Justice 40 communities as part of this. You know, so that again, that need to try to, you know, figure out how to get past that with collaborations and partnerships. So that's kind of where that stands right now, but I'm happy to talk to you more about it. And you know, if you wanted to have a conversation with Dylan about the network geothermal concept, I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you. And if you wanted, I'd be happy to be a part of that, or you know, however you want to try to schedule that. Because I mean, I love this idea. I love network geothermal. I love the idea of doing a feasibility study. So I'm more than happy to help.
And it could be so it could be for a specific building or a specific complex. Think about you know, Concord Green, or thinking about a something where you got a lot of people heating with gas and could save energy and money.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to talk to you more about it when I get back from vacation.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think we should continue this conversation at the next meeting, I think.
The next meeting will be too late. We'll
But
miss
since
that
it's
opportunity.
9:05 already, I think we should, I just want to say, a little bit, you know, the updates. There will be an electric vehicle showcase on September the 14th. I think it's 1 to 4 p.m. And I know volunteers are needed to be there if they have cars to, you know, it's going to be owners' cars being shown. It's not going to be dealers. offering rides as it was last year.
They've already sent out notices to everybody asking for volunteers.
Okay, well,
I mean, the CLMP has.
CMPS, okay, so, but you know,
How is that?
we're prime targets to be volunteers.
Okay.
The location is not definite yet. There are two possible places. But since it hasn't officially been announced, I'm not gonna say anything.
Well, maybe I could just address that. So one of the locations is Crosby's in the parking lot there, and I've been doing some research into that because the town has, I think it's a lease agreement with that property owner for commuter spaces in the front part of that lot closest to the street. And I'm trying to just confirm now that we could sort of use that as leverage as part of those conversations over there, and we could use those front spots. So I'm optimistic and hopeful that we would be able to have it there versus having to look elsewhere.
Okay,
So,
That's-
but hopefully I have more to report on Wednesday when we have our evening meeting.
okay, that sounds good. The other thing is we often had a table at Ag Day. And I haven't arranged to book a table. I'm not quite sure how one does. But I think if we were there, we could talk about the EV showcase. We could also talk about hopefully we'll have some more home tours. And we can talk about rebate programs and things like that. So I think Ag Day is September the 7th, Saturday. That's right downtown, Main Street. Maybe Eric, I can talk to you about how we get a table. I don't know, maybe figure out who's on the Ag committee.
We should definitely do that. I want to be there.
Okay, it's the first Saturday, well, not
Seventh.
it's September the 7th, I believe, yeah. So I think I'm gonna table the other things that are on the agenda unless anybody has anything they need to contribute. We also have opportunity for public comments. You've been very silent all this
Well,
time.
that's what sure I was allowed to talk, so I was trying to, but I actually have to go here in a little bit, but I closed my computer, so I don't remember exactly what I was gonna say, but like the forum that you had, Eric, the climate forum, that was great. I watched the video, I couldn't attend, so that was very helpful. And it is really nice to see where we are in the benchmarking, and it was actually it made me feel good to see we're actually making progress. And I really like it being open to the community so we can all attend and know where we're at, because we do definitely get, from others out front, it's just like neighbors, people are always asking me, where are we? And it's good to have that publicly available, especially with make it more available on the town website. You saw me trying to find the thing on the town website, you emailed it to me, and I was like, I've been on this site so many times, I still can't find a resiliency report or whatever. Anyway, but yeah, thank you so much for everything you're doing. Yeah, I had other comments, but I don't remember. But I mostly came because I wanted to hear about Route 2. Mothers Out Front is also submitting a letter to MassDOT, and we'll
Good.
spread it around. Had a lot of the same points. I think the thing that we had that was a little bit different is we also addressed vulnerable users. And if you have like a new housing, like a whole community coming up at NCI Concord and all that traffic, there is absolutely no way people can get across Route 2 right now. Route 2 really divides our town into one side versus another, and you absolutely need a car to get over there. And if you try to do 40B communities or folks that would prefer to walk places or can't afford a car, they're really isolated. They can't get around. And so that was one thing we brought up, but we were definitely speaking out against the plan as well, because it doesn't address a lot of climate issues as well as this. And I also wanted to, bring it up in terms of transportation. There was someone who was recently killed, crossing 62. I don't know if you heard about it. It was very close to where I
Here in
live.
Concord.
Yeah, they were crossing the Reformatory Branch Trail to go over through Concord. The person was off their bike. They were walking across and they were struck by a car, and it's in the Bedford Citizen. That person passed away. Just again, we're trying to promote climate. We're trying to get people out of their cars and, do the right thing. But we need to also make sure all that infrastructure is in place so people can do it safely. And that's a big bucket, transportation.
Yes, that's another, I think that's next month's meeting, maybe, one
Yeah,
of the coming months anyway.
yeah, I was gonna say, I think Mothers Out Front has done a really good job of focusing on transportation, partly because of Laura Davis's
Oh,
passion.
right, yeah, yeah.
So if we do have another meeting that focuses on that, it would be great if
Yeah.
somebody from
Yeah,
Mothers Out
I-
Front.
I think-
I'm wearing two hats, but I think I'm
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of wearing this hat now,
And
so.
even the MBTA, like, you know, there's a parking at Crosby's, but people who do want to take the commuter rail, you really have to have a lot of forethought because you just getting there and parking, you have to reserve parking, you have to get like way ahead of time, you have to get on the waiting list. You have to pay a large amount of money to be able to park there. You can't just like decide I'm gonna, you know, take the commuter rail
Mm.
today, whatever. And
And
then
the Crosby line, the West Concord, you park, you pay by the day,
yeah,
which was different.
yeah, and then the
So-
one in our side doesn't have it's not handicap accessible.
Yeah, that's true.
All that
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah, and the service is not frequent.
Well, that's that's a whole
I mean-
other problem, another problem, but anyway,
it-
yeah, I don't wanna like keep
Yeah.
the meeting.
Well, unless anybody has anything else,
No, I
We
just had
should-
that one
we
thing,
should-
I sent an email about a movie screening at the free movie screening at the library this week, Wednesday, Mothers Up Front, Oceana, about
thank you,
plastic.
yes, thank
So
you.
if you, I don't know if
Yes.
you were all in that email, but yeah, if
Yes.
anyone can come or
Yeah.
just spread the word, because it's kind of last minute notice. It's at
And
the
that's-
main library this
that's-
Wednesday night.
It's Wednesday.
Yeah, I
okay.
believe at 6 p.m.
Okay, let's go.
So, yeah. Yes.
Okay, well,
Feel free to spread.
I'm gonna adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Janet.